And that first day, I got to be a part of 3 turnaways of women choosing not to have abortions. There's fruitfulness in this work, in this ministry. Very early on, I knew that I wanted to do the work I was doing to the glory of God, right? And whatever that means and however that can look. And that can look differently for different enterprises and different approaches.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to Real Texans? Hey, welcome to this edition of Real Texans, where we have conversations with men and women who are doing interesting things to make life better in the Lone Star State. Excited to be sitting down here with Paul Brown. You and I mainly pass because of the other stuff you do in your life. Pro-life advocate, one of the leaders in the abolish abortion movement in Texas. We'll talk about that a little bit,
Sure,
at some point. But you also, and this is the part that I want to sit down with you. You're from grew up in Duncanville, graduated Duncanville High School, went in the Marine Corps, gun guy.
Yeah.
You founded a luxury watch company, not a digital watch, a real mechanical watches.
Yeah.
We'll go talk about other things, but I want to hear how you decided to get into the watch business. How does someone wake up and say, I want to do mechanical watches?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks for having me on here, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. I've always been a little entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a couple different things in the past. Like I had a lawn business in high school, and you mentioned guns. I started a gun store back in the day for a little while. But I always had that bug in me, and I was actually working in banking for 4 years, and I'm in the financial sector, and I had all these customers who were businesses themselves of one kind or another. And I'm seeing all these businesses, and I'm like, I really want to start a business, but I want to do something that I'm really gonna care about, I'm really gonna enjoy, and something where I can add value.
Right.
And in that same time period, I became aware of higher end watches, right, and how automatic watches worked.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really, most of my life I grew up not really aware of automatic watches, which you may have heard as automatic winding watches or kinetic watches. Mm-hmm. They're powered by the movement of your wrist.
Right.
But I read an article, this really interesting article that talked about how Navy SEALs and Green Berets and a lot of special operations guys will often wear these high-end watches like a Rolex, an Omega, something like that, something I had not heard before. And I learned the history that, going back to the Vietnam War and prior, that you had a lot of these special operations guys wearing these very high-end watches. And the reasons for that, them being very robust and, certainly having very high levels of water resistance to 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters, and so on. And I thought, wow, these are really cool. I think there's actually some value here. This isn't just a statement out of vanity that someone puts on their wrist. There's something tangible and cool there that I really like. Right. And so as I started learning about these, and I had this very real, kind of ever-present desire to start a new business, the two just converged, and I was like, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a watch company.
So I want to step back a minute. After high school, you're in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Linguist, specialist. None of that screams a guy who's going to start a watch company.
It doesn't.
Did banking. Guns, you can kind of see a tie there, kind of mechanical action of a gun, the mechanical action of a watch. Tell me about why, at what point did you decide you were a Marine? I know you're never a former Marine, you're never an ex-Marine, you're always a Marine. At what point did you realize you were a Marine?
I was a little bit born into it, so my dad was a Marine Corps infantry officer, right? And he'd grown up in rural Arkansas, and I spent the first part of my life in rural Arkansas. And so, my brother and I, my cousins, what do? We played in the woods with toy guns, like just run around. Everything was some variation of war, right? And so that was with me from a very, very early age. I wasn't really certain whether I was going to join the Marine Corps or not, or when I was going to join the Marine Corps, until ultimately I did when I was 19. And initially I signed up to go into the infantry. That was where I was going to go until I took a test in boot camp called the Defense Language Aptitude Battery. This is really interesting, kind of crazy test. And they're like, hey, if you want, you can go this linguist route. And I did. And I'm grateful for the opportunities I had there, because I didn't even know about that at the time that I had initially signed up. And I got to experience a lot of very interesting things as a result.
And you were, remember your bio quickly, you were mainly in San Antonio, is that correct? Yeah. When you separated out of the Marine Corps, you then, if I remember correctly, went into banking.
Yes. Yeah. So my background is very eclectic, and
I think that's putting it mildly. I think that's
It's varied. It's eclectic. It's kind of all over the map. So yeah, I got out of the Marine Corps in 2010. I was at the Texas Cryptologic Center in San Antonio. Around the same time as when I got married, and my wife was in Sherman, and so I went up to Sherman. We were there for another almost a year. And right away, I was working as a personal banker at J.P. Morgan Chase there in town in Sherman. But then I went back into the intelligence community to work as a civilian at the Defense Intelligence Agency for about 4 years in the D.C. area. And then so back and forth, just all kinds of movement.
As I noted at kind of the outset, the way I first came across you, I think a lot of folks first came across you was because of, not because of your fantastic watch company, but because of your work in the pro-life movement. Where did that spring up for you?
Yeah, I've been really involved in that since 2015. And what happened was, a lot of people have an origin story that's like this. There's something that just kind of touched their heart. And that's true with me, definitely. My wife was pregnant with our first child, Joshua, who's 9 now. And at the same time, and again, this is 2015, these videos came out showing Planned Parenthood selling the body parts of aborted babies.
David Daleidon's work.
Yes. Excellent work. I watched every single one of those videos, or most of them, right? Just all of them. I could not take my eyes off them. They were horrifying. They were chilling. And they made me sad, and they made me very angry. I'd always been, someone who knew abortion was wrong, was against it. I'd gotten in debates with people about it, the kind of thing you have these conversations in person or online or whatever. But I'd never, ever lifted a finger to do anything about it. And I felt not just sad and angry, but very convicted. Like, I have a child in the womb who I love, right, already. I haven't met them. But I know I love them. I know they're real. And here, these people are not only killing these babies, but selling their body parts. And I was like, I have to do something. I absolutely must. And so I found some folks who are involved in sidewalk advocacy in the Dallas area, and linked up with them and started going out, sidewalk counseling, sidewalk advocacy at the abortion facilities. And went and just spoke to women who are going in to get abortions and told them, don't do this. It was really amazing. But the first day I went out was in July 2015, and that first day I got to be a part of 3 turnaways of women choosing not to have abortions. And I realized, okay, there's a need here. There's fruitfulness in this work, in this ministry. And so I just kept doing it and kept going out there. And as I continued to remain involved, I started learning also about the movement to abolish abortion, right? I started to learn, hey, there's not everything on the legislative side of things is going the way I think it's going. And I realized, oh, wow, we need to be pushing for equal protection under the law. That's what justice looks like. And so 2018, 2019 is when I started to get really involved with that, and started moving more into the legislative side of things in that movement.
So, what unites in some ways your professional endeavors with your watch company and your advocacy in the pro-life space is clearly your faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are any number of business owners who have all sorts of ideas about the way life works outside of their business.
Yeah.
And there's a push, just keep that to yourself. Just go make your watch and shut up.
Yeah.
Go sell your car and shut up. You have taken a very different path.
Yeah.
Tell me about as you're founding as y'all were founding the company, when you decided we're going to be explicit about what we believe.
Yeah, sure.
Walk me through that.
Very early on, I knew that I wanted to do the work I was doing to the glory of God, right? And whatever that means and however that can look. And that can look differently for different enterprises and different approaches. But for me, I knew I wanted to be outspoken in my faith and in truth. I wanted to treat my customers, my suppliers, anyone I'm dealing with dignity. Just as with the movement to abolish abortion, we talk a lot about the Imago Dei, the image of God, that every human being is made in God's image and therefore has significant value. I wanted to apply that same thing in the business space. Like, love others as love your neighbor as yourself, treat others as you want to be treated. How do I want to be treated as a customer, right? That's how I want to treat my customers. But the outspokenness, I just saw that as a very natural kind of way to approach it, given that's just sort of how I live my life. And that's how I've lived in the abolish abortion space. It takes a certain level of willingness to speak truth, regardless of the pushback, regardless of how you'll be perceived by others, just to be involved in that space. And it's like, well, if I would do that there, why would I not do that here? One sort of philosophical or theological perspective that's really shaped a lot of my life is if you'd asked me maybe 10 years ago to describe my life as a pie, the different elements of your life, how big is the God slice? And I would have said, the God slice is the biggest slice, and the next is maybe family and then work and hobbies or whatever else. But what I came to realize more recently is, hey, God owns the entire pie. Right?
Right.
God owns me. He owns my family. He owns my work. He owns my business. And so, on paper, I own Wasson Watch Company. It's my business. But in my heart, I'm stewarding my business for God. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to Jesus Christ. It is His business. And so I have nothing to lose, right? I'm just going to steward it for Him as best I can.
I had a conversation back with Walter Windler, who's the president of West Texas A&M, who's a public university president, but very outspoken in his faith. And what he done, I'll paraphrase, I can't quote him, but they talked about how he felt called to be open about his faith in many ways, so that folks could call him out when he wasn't living. It would be much easier to not.
Yes.
But in many ways, he liked the accountability that it brought for him.
Yeah.
Do you find that to be the case in business?
Absolutely.
Because, in any business, particularly retail business, a lot of opportunities to maybe shade the truth, to overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah.
But when you lead with, we're Christians, ooh, that knocks off the ability to play some of those games, doesn't it?
Yes, it certainly should, and I feel it has with me. Certainly, accountability is something that's there. We had by God's grace, our sales have grown a lot in the last 8-9 months. But prior to that, last year things were very, very, very slow, and we had some work done by some folks that we couldn't pay them right away. We kind of had to ask them, like, hey, can you give us some grace here? They were patient with us, and they took our payments over time. We're finally able to be whole with them. But I was very, anytime we got some money, it was like, this is going to those guys. They don't know what's going on our books. We could delay it or anything. But I was very, very intentional as well when I thanked them, not just to say thank you, but to say, like, thank you, and this is meaningful to me as a follower of Jesus Christ. Like, I want to make sure you know that I appreciate this a lot. right? I wanted them to tie the two together, that my gratitude came from a place of not just gratitude for what they were doing, but gratitude for who I am in Christ, and that, that can give me a worldview that's very appreciative.
Okay, so let's talk about your watch company.
Yeah.
Now, we've danced all around it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about the process of, walk me through the name.
Yeah.
Not exactly a common name, Wasson Watch. Walk through what that means.
Yeah. So Wasson Watch Company. When I started the business in 2018. I knew right away what the idea was for for how to go about starting the business, but it took me several weeks to decide on a name. And I had a couple of criteria. I knew I wanted it to be 1 or 2 syllables, right? Just for ease of saying it and remembering it and so on and so forth. I wanted it to exude some sort of old world European vibe, right? In the luxury watch spaces and not many other spaces, I think that's just a good place to be. And then I also wanted something that meant something real to me. The dirty secret in marketing is you can make up any old backstory. You just can. And if it's believable, if it's cool, people will like it, they'll gravitate it, they'll grab onto it.
We'll all engage in the fiction.
Yes, we'll all engage in the fiction. And that's fine. I'm not trying to impugn that. But for me, part of wanting to be authentic and wanting to be transparent, I want it to really mean something. And so I was lying in bed one night, and I just happened to be thinking about my great-grandfather, Harold Wasson. And Harold Wasson, he was born in Iowa in the late 1800s. He was a mining engineer. World War I broke out. He went and he joined the U.S. Army. He went to France as a captain. And we don't know what he did in France in World War I, but we know he was there. He came back, and then he was a petroleum engineer, and he traveled all over Latin America, basically prospecting for oil. He would find oil, he would buy the land, and then he would sell it to either large companies or governments, the local governments there. And so he had a very interesting, fascinating, adventurous life. In 1942, he was a contributor to a book about strategic resources for hemisphere defense. Oh, wow. So literally it was talking about World War II and how access to strategic resources was going to impact that. In his section, he talked about access to petroleum reserves and how the Axis limited access to strategic petroleum reserves was going to negatively impact their ability to win and therefore, aid the Allies. And it did. I mean, that was a major factor, especially for the African campaign for the Germans. They ran out of oil, right? That was a big problem for them. So his life encompassed entrepreneurship, engineering, military, travel, adventure, strategy, all of these things that meant a lot to me, but I also wanted to sort of be baked into the brand, baked into the products and the experience that we create for our customers. And so it just hit me like that, Wasson Watch Company. I was like, that's it, it's Wasson Watch Company. And if you've seen the logo, you can kind of see it here. It looks like a W, and it also looks like a castle, which if you're familiar, he was an engineer. We don't know if he was in the Army Corps of Engineers or not, but that's the best guess I have. The Army Corps of Engineers logo is a castle, and the castle is also a great symbol of strength, the power of security. Again, that sort of old world European vibe that we like to exude, and it all came together.
So you've brought some watches here?
Yeah, this is one of our watches. This is the same model that I'm wearing. What I'm wearing is actually one of the prototypes. Oh, wow. This is a very special one. This one in particular is serial number 47.
Oh, very
so
cool.
I've saved this in case Donald Trump ever decides he wants to buy a watch, or if he just wants me to send it to him, I'll be happy to. But I realized one day, it occurred to me, I was like, hey, I wonder if I still have serial number 47. And I looked in my inventory and I sure did. So I set it aside and I didn't sell it. We're sold out of this model, and we have version 2 that's on pre-order right now. Yeah. But yeah, I'd be happy to tell you about the watch.
Yeah, please do. Please. So first of all, let's talk about the design and manufacturing. Yeah, do you guys soup to nuts. You guys are doing these watches. This isn't somebody's designing watches in a sweatshop in Singapore, and you guys these are your designs.
Yeah, so these are my designs. Now I'm not a designer, so I worked with other designers to get it exactly where I want it to do. People are doing the actual, pen on paper and everything. I'm like, okay, move this, put that there. Now, as far as the manufacturing goes, these are made in Switzerland with a Swiss movement and with parts that are also manufactured in China. So talk about the bracelet, the case, the sapphire crystal, which is the glass, those sort of simple non-moving parts, those are all made in China. And it, this is one of those things where legally I can say it's made in Switzerland and leave it at that. Right? Because a certain percentage of the value comes from Switzerland. That's where the whole thing is assembled. That's where the movement is made, which is by far the most complex piece and has the most pieces in it. And that's what a lot of companies will do. They'll say it's made in Switzerland and they'll leave it at that. But what you don't know is these other parts are made in China. And that's partially reflective of just the massive amount of manufacturing capability that China has pulled together, that's drawn to itself. And so
it's a reality. You don't have to like reality, but you have to acknowledge reality.
You do have to acknowledge reality. And so it would be theoretically possible for us to make these without sourcing any parts from China. It would just cost significantly more for what is already a very expensive product. And so I say that, I jump right to the chase with that, because again, transparency is very important to us. But I also respect the questions of people saying, is it made in America, or why isn't it made in America, or why are there parts that come from China? It's like, well, this is why. And the other thing I want people to know is we want to manufacture in the U.S. So we're working on another model right now, a dive watch that will be assembled in the U.S. It's going to use a Swiss movement, right? Is there more to be done? Yes. But there aren't really large-scale industrial manufacturers of automatic movements in the U.S. yet. So that's another piece that we're hoping to get to someday to kind of contribute to that with other companies who are interested in the same end goal.
So why should in the 21st century, when at any given moment I have 4 or 5 devices that keep time to the atomic millisecond, it seems like, around me, why do I need a mechanical watch? Why do I need a whether it's the automatic or the kinetic watches? Why do I need that?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question. For me, part of my love for automatic watches initially stemmed from the frustration of wearing a quartz battery-powered watch that ran out of batteries while I was on a trip somewhere, right? In the middle of using it, in the middle of needing it. And just the frustration that came with that, like, man, I'm so tired of changing the batteries on this thing. And it was one I changed the battery fairly recently on, so the battery must just not have been great, whatever the case was. That's a part of it, but I think for most people, it usually goes much deeper than that. There's something really fascinating and satisfying about wearing a really intricate piece of machinery on your wrist that that someone has poured tons of time and effort into, and the quality is there. Like, think about what we make and what we make out of different things. Like, what do we make out of plastic? We make plastic cups. So much is made out of plastic these days. Our phones are becoming more and more plastic. Our cars are becoming more and more plastic, right? And plastic is something you throw away. Plastic is something that deteriorates. Plastic is not something that usually makes special things out of. But special things, what do we make them out of? Steel. We make them out of gold. We make them out of sapphire. This is sapphire crystal. We make them out of materials that last for a long time. And so in a society where so many things are temporary, where so much of what you have is not part of your legacy, it's just something you throw away, this is something that stands out. And so even before you get to, like, say, the background of our beliefs and what we stand for in terms of religion, in terms of values, in terms of politics, before you even get to that, you have something that shows what you stand for in a sort of physical way. I stand for permanence. I stand for value. I stand for something, for taking the time and effort and energy to do it right, even when there are these faster, easier options out here.
Right. There is something that we lose when we talking about watch probably is not the best place to talk about philosophical comments, but maybe it is because it does become very easy to this interconnected world to lose something something that's just real, something that is that can't be manipulated by ones and zeros beaming across the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah.
It's a watch that with real gears, that's really moving, that does speak to a sense of permanence, that speaks to something real in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me, and this may be too much of a tangent, but like we have physical encyclopedias in our house.
Yeah.
And we got them fairly recently, just in the last couple of years, because as our kids were getting older, what we were realizing, hey, everything on the internet is subject to change, right? Anything is out there, whatever it says now, it may say something different in a month, in a year, in 10 years, and who knows what it's gonna say. And it's not that those encyclopedias are perfect. They're from the 1980s, they've got stuff in there that we know is incorrect or we disagree with them, but it's not gonna change, right? It's there, it's on our shelf. We encourage our kids, if they have a question about something, where do we look it up? We look it up in this book, right? We don't just go straight to this electronic, ecosphere where, again, anything can change, anything can happen. It's all very subjective.
There was the incident a number of years back now when people had purchased, ironically, 1984 by George Orwell as an electronic download for their Kindles, and at some point Amazon found out that, oh no, we didn't have the rights to sell that version, and so they just removed them, and people got credits or they were given the chance to download a different version of the book. And it was telling, if you bought a book in a bookstore and you put it on your shelf, it was yours. In the same way, that someone can change the time on my Apple Watch tomorrow, and I guess I'm just going to have to go along with
That's what time it is now.
That's what time it is. Yeah. Okay. When you've now got not quite 10 years under your belt with Wasson Watch. What advice, though, at this point would you give to someone who's entrepreneurially minded about, one, entering business, but more importantly, how for themselves to decide? How do they incorporate their faith, their beliefs, pull that whole pie together in their business?
Yeah, I think anyone who's starting a business for the first time, probably what you need to know is it's a lot harder than you think it is, and it'll probably take a lot longer than you think it will to get successful, to get profitable. That I've long believed that if you keep on working at it and you just keep trying, eventually you're going to get there. It's not about getting lucky, right? The people who get lucky are the ones who are out there trying this opportunity and that opportunity and that opportunity, and then they get lucky one day.
Right. The overnight success that takes 20 years.
Exactly. I literally make that joke all the time. I'm like, I'm working on the overnight success after 10 years plan. That's what I'm going for. And so be consistent. Have that stick-to-itiveness. One of the things that really spoke to me because I've had multiple decision points where it would have made sense to walk away. The most difficult was I spent a long time working, again, because I'm working through other companies. I was working with one company, and I went through 4 rounds of prototypes with them, and they kept on sending me really what I wasn't asking for. I was saying, I need this, but I'm getting that. And I realized, it's never going to happen with this company. I've already spent all this time and all this money working with them. What'll I do? And I could have just said, you know what, maybe this wasn't a good idea, walk away. But I was really impacted by, in Proverbs it says, the sluggard sticks his hand in the dish, he doesn't even lift it up to eat. Or the sluggard kills game, he doesn't even cook it. There's something that is good and right about finishing what you start, right? If you're gonna take the time, the energy, and the effort and plan this thing and start working on it, finish it. Unless there's some really good reason not to, but otherwise finish it. So stick-to-itiveness is the big thing for new business owners. As far as incorporating your faith into your business, be bold. Don't fear the one who can destroy the body. Fear the one who can destroy the soul and the body in hell, right? That's God. The Bible talks about the fear of the Lord so many times. And if I had $1 for every pastor who tried to explain that fear of the Lord doesn't mean fear the Lord, I would be super wealthy, or I'd go into that business, right? But no, like we should have a healthy, respectful fear of God that's rooted in our love for him, but also rooted in the knowledge that, hey, he is God. He is all powerful. We have made an offense against him, right? We deserve his anger and wrath. And it's only by the grace of God through the blood of Jesus Christ that we don't receive that wrath. So rather than being sort of tied down by fear of man, what are my customers going to think if I say this thing? What are my vendors, what are my suppliers going to think if I say this thing? What are my competitors going to think? What's the media going to say? Instead go like, no, I serve the God of the universe. What's he going to think if I say this? What's he going to think if I don't say this, right? Where are my priorities? Where do those lie? If you have a right order of understanding of who God is and who you are in relationship to God, that's the foundation of it. And from that foundation, well, then it kind of becomes easy. You just go, yeah, no, I fear the one who can destroy the body and the soul. That's where I start.
If folks are interested in taking a look at your lineup, where can they find you?
Yeah, so wassonwatch.com is our website. Right now we have the one model on sale for pre-order, the Wasson Automatic Field Watch. We're also very, very heavily active on X, formerly known as Twitter. So it's just at Wasson Watch. That's where you can follow us and hear what we're thinking about any variety of topics, any time of day. There's a ton of content on there now, and we continue to put in a lot of work there.
Outstanding. Well, Paul Brown, thank you so much for sitting down today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us for this conversation with Real Texans.